Hello, Shalom, the view from Israel. I'm Barry Shaw. Today, we're going to be talking about Jeremy Corbyn. As most of you may know, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, which is the watchdog for racism in Great Britain, is set to launch an inquiry into anti-Semitism in the British Labour Party. The Watchdog Commission have only up till now investigated one other political party in Great Britain for racism, and that was the far-right British National Party. Now they're investigating the leading opposition party in Her Majesty's government, the Labour Party. And the Jewish community is largely blaming the party's leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and his decades of singling out Israel for ceaseless condemnation. Now, in the factor for needing to give full disclosure, I have been invited to give presentations both in the UK and here in Israel on the Corbyn threat to Jews and Israel. In today's program, we're going to concentrate on Jeremy Corbyn's seeming obsession with Israel. And I'm delighted to say we've got a very special guest today, Jodie Cohen. Jodie is an award-winning public affairs communications consultant with 18 years experience of working with top UK consultancies and with industry-leading clients. And in 2012, she set up the Jodie Cohen Communications, offering corporate communications, public relations, and public affairs consultancy. Jodie divides her time between Israel and London and gives her client effective and cost-effective management. And Jodie is also a political analyst, and she has done a forensic deep dive on Corbyn's obsession with Israel in the British Parliament. Jodie, welcome to the show. Welcome to The View from Israel.
Thank you very much.
Tell us, Jodie, how did you start with this analysis of Jeremy Corbyn's record when it comes to Israel in British Parliament?
Right. So as you said, we've heard a lot about Jeremy Corbyn's associations, how he welcomed his friends of Hamas and Hezbollah into the British Parliament. There's a lot of news reports continually accusing of anti-Semitism, of anti-Zionism. I wanted to see for myself actual hard data. So I thought if I look at one area of his political activity, early day motions, that's one area where it's possible to quantify his interest in different issues. So I had a look at the online records from when they began. He's obviously been an MP, a member of Parliament, for a very long time. I had a look at his early day motions, the ones he sponsored, not ones that he's just signed that were for other people, and did this from when online records began up until when he became leader of the opposition. And he has tabled 834 early day motions during that time over a broad number of issues, 200 different issues covering 67 different countries. And I statistically looked at his early day motions on each country, on each subject, and by far the issue that takes up most of his early day motions is Israel.
How do you explain to our viewers what early day motions are? They probably don't understand the workings of the British Parliament.
Yes, so an early day motion is a motion for which not a fixed date hasn't been set for debate in Parliament. So it's effectively, in practice, it's like a parliamentary petition. MPs can table them, which means like to sponsor an early day motion, or they can sign somebody else's. But I only looked at the early day motions that he's tabled because I think that's a stronger expression of his views.
Okay, so how many early day motions has Jeremy Corbyn sponsored?
During this time period, he sponsored 834 EDMs, early day motions. Of those, 64 have been critical of Israel. And let's just compare that to other issues. He's well known for his support for trade unionists, for labour relations, the education, transport sectors. His early day motions on Israel are more than all of those issues combined. And if you look at other countries as well, I ranked in order the early day motions he's tabled on all different countries. First comes Israel with 64, and second comes Morocco with 26. So there's a big discrepancy between his interest in different countries. Also, if you look at what's missing, that he's only tabled 2 early day motions in the same time period on Syria. They were back in 2013. One of them welcomed the fact that the UK was not going to take military action at the time. And the second one was calling for a weapons of mass destruction-free Middle East. There are no early day motions from him on the Yazidis. There are no early day motions on Hamas or Hezbollah. There are only 7 on Iran, and most of those are supporting trade unionists, nothing condemning the repeated threats to Israel that we see coming from Iran.
So basically, you're saying that you've done a statistical analysis where you've differentiated between Corbyn's top 20 foreign early day motions and Corbyn's most frequent early day motions. And on both of those lists, Israel comes out number 1.
Absolutely. If you also look, he's elected to be the Member of Parliament for Islington. So he is supposed to be representing the people of Islington. So if you compare his early day motions on Israel with 64 to Islington, which is only 43, it appears he cares more about Israel and the Palestinians than his own constituents who he's elected to represent.
So it looks like Corbyn is more concerned or obsessed with Israel, and has been for decades in his parliamentary life, than other questionable regimes and key conflicts. Can you give us any information of some of his early day motions as it might apply to some of the other major troubling concerns in the world around the Middle East, or with any other radical regimes? Has he posted anything to do with ISIS, for instance?
No. On ISIS, Daesh, Islamic States, whatever one might call them, I know he refers to them as Daesh, he's tabled absolutely no early day motions on them. As again, the Yazidis, the persecution of the Yazidis by Islamic State, there's no reference to them in his early day motions. So it is remarkable, I think, his focus on Israel and the Palestinians. When I say he's tabled 64 motions on Israel and the Palestinians, that actually means either critical of Israel or one-sidedly pro-Palestinian. There's one early day motion that I didn't include in that 64 figure, which you could say is somewhat positive towards something Israeli, which was praising a peace initiative between the Palestinians and Israelis. So there's 24 early day motions critical of Israel, very heavily one-sided pro-Palestinian, and 0 on ISIS.
He's obviously got a fixation on the Middle East vis-a-vis the Palestinians and Israel. But have you got any records of Jeremy Corbyn ever sponsoring an early day motion on the problem with Iran? Because most of the Middle East, I'm not just talking about Israel, I'm talking about a lot of the major Arab states in the Middle East, are gravely concerned about Iran. What has Jeremy Corbyn, if at all, has done anything with regard to his early day motions sponsored with regard to criticizing Iran and their nuclear ambition, as well as their violent interference in Middle Eastern affairs?
He's done 7 early day motions regarding Iran, not really criticizing the regime, but talking about support for trade unionists, specific cases there. He hasn't once referred to the threat posed to Israel and others by potential nuclear weapons. or Iran's repeated calls to destroy Israel and wipe it off the face of the map of the earth.
Has Jeremy Corbyn ever posted an early day motion on the status of Jerusalem?
There's one interesting early day motion. I mean, he has referred to, he did one early day motion on the need for religious freedom for all religions in Jerusalem, which I think shows a lack of understanding of the realities on the ground. One other very interesting early day motion is in 2002, he tabled an early day motion called National Petition for Palestine. And in that, he called on the British government to boycott Israel. So this isn't just settlements, this is the whole of Israel, including an arms embargo until such time as Israel grants the right of return to Palestinian refugees or gives them compensation if they choose that, shares Jerusalem, recognizes a Palestinian state. And there's a number of clauses in this early day motion, but the key point is that as recently as last year, Jeremy Corbyn denied that if he became Prime Minister, he denied that he supports a blanket boycott of Israel. And he said he only supports boycotting settlement produce. But actually, we all, his supporters take pride in the fact that he's a man of principle. He sticks to his policies and principles and has done over his 3 decades in Parliament. So if we assume that he does actually still believe what he believed back then, we can assume that if he becomes Prime Minister, he would want to do a boycott of Israel.
Well, to back up what you just said, as part of my presentation that I do with regard to exposing the truth about Corbyn and the threat to Israel, he once made a statement, and I can give you the date, it was the 23rd of July, 2014, in which Jeremy Corbyn said that the UK has a very close relationship with Israel, and it's time that this relationship be brought to an end. It seems that in opposition, he's a bit of a threat. But if, for instance, he led the Labour Party to become the next Prime Minister of Great Britain and the Labour Party, the next government of Great Britain, that threat could be actually quite real and quite drastic. Jodie, how do you see any polls, any information, any trends that you could give us about the potential of actually Jeremy Corbyn becoming the next British Prime Minister?
I think it's an increasing likelihood. I mean, all the polls in May showed that he had a lead over the Conservative Party. And obviously, most of those were conducted before Theresa May said that she was going to be resigning next week. So that they were against Theresa May. I think a lot will depend on who the leader of the Conservative Party is, who by default become the next Prime Minister. But some of the recent polls were showing as much as a 9-point lead over the Conservatives. They're talking about Boris Johnson being the only candidate who might have the cross-party appeal to voters to be able to beat Jeremy Corbyn. We'll know more. I think by the end of July, we'll know who the leader of the Conservative Party and the next Prime Minister is. But I also know that Conservative MPs consider Boris Johnson to be a bit like Marmite. For viewers who might not know what Marmite is, it's a spread for sandwiches that people either love or hate. Some MPs love Boris, as he's known. He's the only politician to be known by his first name. That shows his popularity. He's a former mayor of London, and he got elected for 2 terms and ended his second term popular. And this was in London, which is a heavily Labour area. We will have to wait and see that there's also a number of members of Parliament who are doing everything they can to stop Boris. The Stop Boris candidate is Michael Gove, another member of Parliament who would like to be the leader and the next Prime Minister. We'll see in the next few weeks how the currently 12 candidates who have said that they're going to stand for the Conservative leadership, they'll get whittled down over a number of stages to the final two. And people are saying if Boris Johnson is in the final two, he'll be the next Prime Minister. And he does have, it's considered he has the best chance of beating Jeremy Corbyn. If he's not in the final two, the chances of a Jeremy Corbyn premiership go up even more.
Jodie, I want to tell you, as part of my presentation with regard to the Corbyn threat to Jews and to Israel, I've got my statistics, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. For instance, the viewers might be interested to know that by the end of 2018, if you compare membership of both the ruling Conservative Party and the Labour Party, as of the end of last year, 2018, the Conservative membership, registered members, were 124,000. That's the ruling party. Labour, on the other hand, their registered membership was 564,000. That's more than 4 times greater than the Conservatives. In other words, since Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party just over 3 years ago, he has tripled the membership of that. Before you come in, Jodie, a couple of other factors I think you ought to take on board. The average age of the Conservative member is 57 and a half, and the average age of a Labour member is 53. So the Labour membership is younger. And the final thing, and this is the most staggering one I want to give you, is funding for the 2 major political parties in Great Britain. A combination of membership fees and donation as of the end of 2017. The Conservatives have gathered in membership fees and donations by the end of 2017, £2.5 million. The Labour Party, on the other hand, have brought in a figure of £34.2 million. And this is their treasure chest in which they can build up grassroots organisations heading into the next election. Your thoughts on that, Jodie?
Absolutely, they're all really good indicators of the trends, the way things are going in Britain right now. And I think the next leader of the Conservative Party, the next Prime Minister, will do everything they can, not only obviously to deliver Brexit and set Britain on a path, hopefully, to prosperity. They need to unite their own party. The Conservative Party is currently at war. They need to unite the country. And I suspect they will do whatever they can to put off a general election for as long as possible. As you know, the next one doesn't need to be held until 2022. But Jeremy Corbyn is already doing whatever he can to call for a general election to take place earlier.
Yes, and this is the concern. As Jodie quite rightly said, Britain seems to be in quite an amount of chaos right now, mainly over the Brexit issue, and it could lead, if there isn't an affirmative Conservative leader, in other words, replacing Theresa May as a more affirmative Prime Minister, then I think Britain could be headed in a general election, and then all bets are off. Jodie, I want to thank you for everything you've said. Is there anything you want to add or to close with?
I think really the question that I would have for Jeremy Corbyn, where I'm speaking to him right now, is why he's clearly, over a 22-year period, he has relentlessly been tabling these early day motions, critical of Israel more so than any other country, any other issue in the world. And really the answer for the question that he needs to answer is why. Until he does, I think people will question his motivation.
You're quite right. And I think I have the answer for that. But Jodie, I want to thank you for your contribution. I think a lot of our viewers will be very interested in this. And I would ask our viewers, if you have any more questions of Jodie, you could send me an email and I'll forward it to her to theviewfromisrael@gmail.com. And if you want her to provide you with any other statistical analysis, or if you want to go Jodie to go searching for some statistical analysis on some of the other issues, I hope she'll help you do this. Jody, thank you for your contribution. Thank you for being on The View from Israel. Shabbat Shalom.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jody. Well, I have a part of an answer to Jody's closing question. What is this about Jeremy Corbyn that drives this obsession with Israel? And quite frankly, my research comes up with one absolute answer, and that is a latent inbred anti-Semitism that goes back decades with Jeremy Corbyn. I don't want to go into the program because it's a whole new program on itself. But in my opinion, what Jeremy Corbyn does, he deflects his anti-Semitism into anti-Israelism. He knows it wouldn't be popular for him. And here we have the racist watchdog now investigating the Labour Party for their anti-Semitism. So he deflects it into anti-Israelism. It's no coincidence that the only Jews that Corbyn allows around him are those who criticize and act against Israel. People like Glenn Saka of Jewish Voices for Palestine, John Landsman of the Momentum group of Labour Party, and a small fringe radical group of Jews called Judah, who once held a Kaddish, that's a Jewish mourner's prayer in Parliament Square, to mourn the loss of Palestinians who were killed by Israel in a previous response to Palestinian Hamas rocket attacks. They hadn't taken on board the fact that the vast majority of those kills were Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists. Corbyn, you need to understand, perceives three evils in the world. It's not the evils of communism that have slaughtered hundreds of millions of the people in Russia and in China. His three evils are American imperialism, European colonialism, and capitalism. You would think these are things of the past, the sort of things that only an old socialist like Jeremy Corbyn can adopt, or Bernie Sanders in America. But they're still relevant today. And wrapped up in these three evils of American imperialism, European colonialism, and capitalism are the Jews and Israel and Zionism. Corbyn's starting place, part of his political birth in Great Britain came out of the socialist workers' movement. Recently, a few months ago, some people who were lobbying, some people going in to hear a speech by Jeremy Corbyn, pointing out not only his anti-Semitism, but anti-Israelism, picked up a brochure, which I'll show you on the screen, of the latest brochure of his movement. He's left that to join the Labour Party, but the Socialist Workers' Movement is a communist Marxist organization. And on the front of this brochure was a Star of David intermingled in a swastika. And the logo on the front was Zionism, a racist, anti-Semitic, and reactionary tool of imperialism. You get the picture. It's not the Labour Party or the far left that is sprinting anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. It is, in fact, Israel itself, who they call a racist, anti-Semitic, reactionary tool of imperialism. This is the fraudulent message that is part and parcel of the character of Jeremy Corbyn. I could go back onto various things. For instance, in 2009 and again in 2015, Corbyn invited two designated terrorist organizations into the Houses of Parliament. He invited Hamas and he invited Hezbollah, despite the fact this is an infringement of British parliamentary rules, and he got away with it. In 2010, while Israeli citizens were under a rocket bombardment from Hamas, Palestinian Hamas in Gaza, there was a rally in London, through the streets of London, carrying Hamas and Hezbollah flags to Trafalgar Square, in which Jeremy Corbyn addressed the people in the Parliament Square by saying, in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. He was sympathizing for the Palestinians who were suffering under a response to the militia attack by Palestinian Hamas and Islamic Jihad against Israeli civilian targets. What is striking is at the same time he was saying this in Trafalgar Square, Assad was barrel bombing people in Syria, including thousands of Palestinians in places like the Yarmouk refugee camp. While he was talking in Trafalgar Square condemning Israel, Syria was killing 4,000 Palestinians, making another 85,000 Palestinians displaced, homeless, refugees by Assad barrel bombing. Assad is, of course, supported by Iran and also by Iran's proxy, Jeremy Corbyn's friends, Hezbollah. So he was silent when Palestinians were slaughtered by Assad in Syria. This is the duplicity of Jeremy Corbyn's language. There's a lot more that we can say about Jeremy Corbyn and his attitude against Israel. But one thing is sure, if Jeremy Corbyn ever became the Prime Minister of Great Britain, his words will be changed into actions. He will impose a boycott, of a selective boycott, not a total one, on Great Britain, on Israel from the British government. He will, through the United Nations, initiate anti-Israel resolutions and make sure they go into the Security Council, where next time, under a Corbyn British government, the British government would not abstain, but to actually support some resolutions against Israel. This is the true Corbyn threat to Israel that one should be made aware of before the next British election. This is Barry Shaw from The View from Israel. If you have any quotations, interested, comments, or anything like this, you can contact me at theviewfromisrael@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me. And if you think this broadcast, this video is of interest, please share it with others. Barry Shaw, The View from Israel. Thank you. Goodbye.